Okay, I think it looks like we're ready to go. So hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to the BC Library Association Summer Conference. The conversation continues. I'm Andrea Freeman, Executive Director of the Association of BC Public Library Directors, and ABC PLD is pleased to partner with BCLA on today's panel. A little bit about the BC Library Association. They're privileged to have their office and to be presenting the 2020 Summer Conference in the city of Vancouver, which is located on the unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples, including the territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. Please note that this session is being recorded, and any questions or comments in the chat window that are sent to all attendees will be included in the recording. If you have any technical questions, send a message through chat to all panelists, and we will get back to you. For questions for our presenters today, add your question to the chat and select for all panelists and attendees so everyone can see your question. How we're going to do it today is the panelists will present one after another, and then we'll have time at the end for your questions, and I'll be moderating the questions. So we'd like to welcome Rebecca Burbank, Sarah Felkar, Monika Willner, and Desiree Barron, who will be sharing their experiences about making public computers available in their libraries during this time of COVID. So a little bit about each of the panelists. Rebecca Burbank has been a part of the Powell River Public Library since 2015 and has been the chief librarian for 2 years. Powell River Public Library restored access to public computers in mid-June. Sarah Felkar is the head of technology at the West Vancouver Memorial Library. She's worked in her current position for 2 years, and she's been at West Vancouver for 12 years. She's passionate about equitable access and digital literacy. Monika Willner has been the Burns Lake Public Library Director since August 2018. She was born and raised in Poland, lived for a decade in Germany before moving to Canada and making Burns Lake her home. Monika comes from a diverse multicultural background, English being her 4th language, so she says to please excuse her if she talks funny. Desiree Barron is the branch head of Vancouver Public Library's newest branch, the Nutsamut Strathcona branch. Since May 20th, she's been leading VPL's Computer Lab, the first public library computing lab to open in Canada after the COVID-19 pandemic. Des is a passionate advocate of fan fiction and is co-administrator of a fan fiction interest group made up of over 3,000 writers, artists, and readers from all over the world. Welcome Rebecca, Sarah, Monika, and Desiree, and I'll turn it over to you, Rebecca, to get us started.
Thanks so much, Andrea, and thank you, Shannon. I really appreciate you both moderating this and making this information sharing available to so many people. Like so many others, the information I'm about to share is changing really quickly, and of course we are about to change it again. I know that all of these phases that different libraries are talking about really just means constant change. So good on all of you who are here for working through all of these details and all this change. So in Powell River, currently, we have some services in the public computer area available. We have 2 machines. One is available by appointment, one is for drop-in. We found that the drop-in was really important for our community as the majority of our public computer users use our guest passes and just show up in the moment. So we had to make that available, which has worked well for us. Our appointments and drop-in use is 45 minutes, and then we preserve 15 minutes for staff cleaning time. We have also printing and scanning available and remote one-on-one support by appointment, and that's done by email or phone. And we have some very limited information services and troubleshooting available in person. Next slide, please. Currently, we are not offering in-depth information service or the side-by-side support that we typically provide. And we're not offering our 3D printer, which before March had lived in our public computer area and was available for drop-in use. Next slide, please. So our safety measures, I know these are the details we've all been working through, really start at the door. And for us, that's the talk. So the safety talk in the library the safety measures we also have built in are things like occupancy. And for us, like other public spaces, this is limited by the physical space, that 5 square meter rule, and washroom access. So having our public washroom available enables us to have more people in the space. Currently, we have 3 people allowed in our 17,000 square foot library. So our occupancy is very low. Technically, we are open, but it is in an extremely limited capacity. We also use barriers to prevent patrons from roaming into the space where they are not allowed to be in right now. So that cordons off the staff area and the stacks, meeting rooms, all of those things. So it really focuses where the patrons can go. They can come in through the door and go to the public computers, and that's pretty much it. Our safety measures also include cleaning those frequently touched surfaces for the public computers. That's the keyboards, touch screens, the table, everything sort of around there. That's done daily by janitorial staff and in between each session by library staff. We follow the MSDS for each product that we're using and have been working really hard to find those products that don't require PPE, so we're not using as much of that. So we're largely using an alcohol-based cleaner. Next slide, please. So at the entrance, we find that this role, that sort of like the welcome role, has been one of the most important things in our change. The role at our entrance really works to triage the patron's need when they come in and really assess, is the need that the patron has at the door, is this something we can do remotely? If it's a print job that they need to come in to complete, can we just have them use our remote print service? If it's an account update, can we just have them call in? The person at the door also explains service limitations. So those expectations for the patron are set at that point. And they know that the in-depth side-by-side service that we typically offer and that they expect isn't currently available. And then we go over the brief safety talks. So no illness, use the sanitizer, you must maintain distance, and we recommend mask use in the library. Next slide, please. So we are still offering information services, and we do that remotely, as I mentioned, by phone or by email. And we have limited in-person support by use of a mobile barrier or a person coming up to the desk to ask questions with use of a stationary barrier. We also have like really brief distanced conversations. So if we can tell someone from more than 6 feet away, I think the print button is in the upper right-hand corner, we'll do that as well. Next slide, please. So we launched with some really basic materials to really just enforce the physical changes we wanted patrons to be aware of in the space. So we launched with caution tape instead of professional looking cordons. We used painter's tape on the floor, and this was a real guide from the entry point and that welcome station to the exact public computer that we wanted them to sit at. And you'll see that in the picture at the end of this presentation. And of course we have disinfectant. We've improved our setup with a couple of added items. We now have plexiglass in between computers that are facing each other. And we have a mobile barrier cart. I believe this idea originally came from VPL. I thought it was brilliant. So our maintenance department made a mobile barrier, which is essentially a book truck with plexi on top, which has worked quite well. And we finally got our real cordons, so we don't have caution tape up anymore. Next slide, please. So this is what our space looks like. We have a box around the seating area where we would like the patron to remain. This enables us to just clean the surfaces within that area. You can see the plexi between the computers facing each other. In the computer area that's shown, there's only one computer that's available currently. And the tape line leading away from the square area goes all the way to our door. So our staff at the welcome station can say, follow the thin green line to your computer, and patrons really can just stick to exactly where we wanted them to go. and wind up at that station. And that just reduces the commonly touched surfaces that are needed to be cleaned. Next slide, please. This is just another view of that same station. Currently, we just have 2 computers in this whole station available. When we're fully up and running, we will have 8. I hope that information was really helpful. I think I'm going to turn it over to the next presenter.
Thank you, Rebecca. Okay, we can go to the next slide. So just as a bit of context, the West Vancouver Memorial Library is a medium-sized library serving about 42,000 community members and is a single branch system. So that's sort of where this comes from. In the before times, we had more than 30 public computers available to the community, as well as a staff desk dedicated to supporting technology questions. And I want to start off by thanking my amazing team for all their work in getting adjusted to virtual services and now readjusting to in-person services again. So our library building reopened to the public yesterday. We've got lots of signage, an example on the screen here right now. Currently, we don't have any space available for solo study or computer, like laptop use at this time. And copying is available unassisted on our main floor only. So we're not offering assisted copying at this time. Next slide. On our lower floor, which is where sort of our computing area is, our community computing center, we have it set so that ideally you only come down if you have a computer reservation. Reservations can be made online, by phone, or at the main floor information desk. We found yesterday that obviously not a lot of people knew that or had tried that. So there's going to be some adjustment. And if we can make a reservation on the spot for someone, we'll do that. Our occupancy for the floor is currently 20 people, including staff. We have 12 public computers available and 2 to 3 staff on the floor at all times. We also have scanners available at the moment. So next slide. You can still print from home. We use the printer on service from Envisionware, which is what we use for computer booking. So they are linked together. And in the morning, staff are checking for virtual submissions, printing them off, and then adding the printing charges to patrons' library accounts through our ILS. They can then pick up their print jobs from the hold shelf, I think, or we're still working this out to see what works best. There might be a file folder behind our main floor desk so that folks can just pick up their print job and go. We are encouraging patrons to pay their fines online if they can, but we do have sort of payment at our self-checks as well as at our accounts desk. Next slide. So reservations right now are for 90 minutes a piece with a 30-minute buffer in between sessions. So what that looks like for us is that reservations start at 10 a.m., 12 p.m., 2 p.m., and 4 p.m. since our hours are 10 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. And that gives staff enough time to wipe down all the surfaces and work with anyone who's lingering or has any questions, or if they arrive early, there's enough time in between. Cleaning right now is done with Oxiver, which is diluted, and when diluted does not require any additional PPE, but does allow that it's sort of a spray, wait, and then wipe down. For cleaning the screens, it's preferred that you sort of spray the cloth and then wipe down that way instead of applying directly to a computer screen. But when applying to the keyboards or the mice or the table or the scanners, you can just apply directly without any issues. Next slide. So this is what our sort of very fancy looking online booking system is. So this is available through Envisionware. It's a module you can turn on. We work with our municipal IT department to sort of get this set up. Basically, all you need to do is click on that little reserve a PC button, and then you sort of walk through. You could reserve a specific computer if you have your favorite. although they're all identical. And then you would just, when you walk to your computer, which have sort of big signs next to each of them, you just type in your PIN and then you're ready to go. So you could also cancel a reservation if you aren't able to make it. We've limited it so that you can only make one reservation per day. And then we're asking patrons to sort of monitor their own use and only use it twice per week, but we aren't able to add limits in there. At this time, Envisionware does not have automatic buffers. We asked about that because ideally it would be after each reservation, there'd be an automatic buffer. So we wouldn't have to sort of manage that ourselves. But at this time, we're manually inputting sort of shorter sessions using guest passes so that there's buffers in between each session and a patron can't accidentally book in between during our cleaning time. Next slide. So some of our tools that we have, each staff member has a face shield that we bought through Interlink with a little sticker that says, "Here to help you today" from 2 meters away, which is super sweet. And they can wear masks and gloves if they prefer. And then we also have laser pointers available, which I think was a VPL innovation that staff can use for helping from a distance. We've ordered 2 plexiglass barriers on wheels so that staff can sit next to the patrons, but those have not arrived yet. For one-on-one support and sort of personal device support, we are encouraging patrons to contact our phone line where we have a staff member available, as well as we have sort of one-on-one appointments through our device clinic that can be by phone or by Zoom that are available every week if someone needs sort of help with their personal devices. Next slide. So here's a picture of our service desk. So we've got a number of plexiglass barriers and there's one of my team with her shield on modeling for me last week. We also have markers sort of to indicate where what that blue tape sort of 2 meters away is. And it seems to be working pretty well. I've also put the blue tape sort of around the public computers so you can easily see where that 2 meter mark is around each public computer. Most of the staff who are working on this desk are from the department, so they are just adjusting to the changes in PPE and distancing, as well as the cleaning changes, although we are borrowing a few staff from our collections department as additional support, as we are staffing sort of both the virtual services as well as the in-person services at this point. All staff received in-person training for sort of the safety and PPE use recently in late June. And we have shared FAQ documents as well as sort of a suggestions document that's shared that staff can just add as patrons request or as they think of something. Most of our departments as well are meeting daily just to check in, especially since we are just reopening in order to collect feedback and gauge sort of where the pinch points are. So after yesterday, we've made quite a few changes this morning as well. We also are using Slack for communication for transferring patrons or getting additional help if someone gets stuck. Next slide. That's just a picture of sort of the public computers as they are. So we have sort of our main on the right-hand side, our public computing area, which has 2 computers per table, separated and with the labels, and you can see the blue tape on the floor. And then in our quiet sort of study area, we now have 4 computers sort of separated that are more of a study carrel setup. And that's it for me. After the first day, we didn't have that many folks in, but we expect as sort of the word gets out, we'll have more people using our public computers. Thank you.
And before you start, Monika, I'm just going to interject. If you have questions that have come up already based on hearing Rebecca and Sarah's presentation, feel free to type your questions in the chat box. Or if you have questions that are coming up as Monika and Des present, feel free to write those in, because then when it comes time for Q&A, that'll help me manage the questions, especially the ones that we begin with. So just wanted to say that. Over to you, Monika.
Welcome, everyone. I would like to thank first Andrea and Shannon for facilitating this panel today and giving me the opportunity to speak. So I'm a chief librarian at Brunswick Public Library. This is a small rural library in northern BC, located in just about a middle between Prince George and Smithers, and we are serving community of 6,000 people. Next slide, please. So as you can see, this is our registration form. What we are asking our patrons to do is to call and reserve their space on the computer. The registration forms and the time is about 45 minutes for the session. We allowing 15 minutes for the staff member to clean and disinfect after every patron used our computers. We do not have online registration as our community is not as well connected. Over 60% of the community doesn't have a very good access to the computers. So we still depend on the old good ways using a telephone. Next slide, please. So as you can see, everywhere in our library, we have sanitizers placed in different places. But upon the entry, staff reinforms, as Rebecca mentioned, the talk, and reinforms our public about what is available at the time in the library. So for phase 2, right now we do not have washrooms available. Personal assistance is limited, so we encourage our patrons actually to talk to us from behind the plexiglass. Photocopying is available only by staff help. However, we do have a printer located beside our public computers, and the patrons are able to print out some materials from the websites or whatever they are working on, and either they can take this off the printer and the printer is being disinfected afterward, or the staff member will come up and help wearing gloves and a face shield. Collection browsing at the moment is not available. Next slide, please. This is our computer station pre-COVID. As you can see, everyone is really happy. We used to have 7 public computers available, and they were pretty much busy. Right now, we had to change the whole setup. Next slide, please. And this is our new setup. So we have only 3 public computers available. There are spaced 6 feet apart. We've placed plexiglass in between the computers. Every station has their own sanitizer. The keyboard is wrapped in Klingon. That was our cheapest solution actually to use for the computers and for the keyboard. And it is pretty empty, but that's the access we have right now available to the public. Next slide, please. So some procedures. We do encourage our patrons to use the help from behind the plexiglass, but as we go, we have many community members, seniors who require personal assistance. So we will brainstorm the ideas how we can help them from close up. I think that Sarah just mentioned plexiglass on wheels, which we would like to implement. It's a fantastic idea, but that may be another step for us. As of now, my staff is using either face shield or face mask and gloves, so they could come close to the patron and help them on a safe distance as well. Next slide, please. These are our sanitizing procedures. So as you can see, staff is required to wear gloves while disinfecting the station. So the first surface is wiped down. We use the Lysol wipes or on all surfaces except screen. For screen, the staff is using very mild vinegar solution. Also, we don't damage our equipment. The wrap is being disposed, and then a staff member is disposing the gloves and wearing a new one to put the new Klingon wrap on the keyboard. Next slide, please. And that's pretty much, it's very straightforward. Like I said, it's a very small library. We evolve our procedures as we go. Every day we're getting new informations, and especially after all the meetings with ABCPLD weekly or bi-weekly, the information is coming in and we are trying to adjust what we are doing in the library. I have additional information today. As of today, Burbank Public Library has opened door to public. This is the first day we opened actually at 9:30, and we are implementing senior hour from 9:30 till 10:30. Then we will have 1.5 hours available to regular public for browsing and usage of computers as well. And then we would close from 12 to 1 o'clock and have a break for disinfecting all surfaces, and there will be a washroom access, so all accessible places will be disinfected and cleaned, and then we will be reopened from 1 o'clock till 3:30 to the public as well. And after that, again, the same process of disinfecting and cleaning the whole library. And we are actually very excited to be open to public as of today. Thank you so much for listening.
Thanks, Monika. And Des, take it home.
Thank you, Andrea. So the Alice Mackay Computer Lab was opened on May 25th this year, so fairly early on. Our mandate actually was to address the shortage of the availability of computers for people who do not have access to any kind of technology, like through the internet or a computer. So we had a very specific target audience for this lab. Next slide, please. So because it is only 8 computers, we went with a manual registration at 2 time intervals, one at 9 and one at 1 p.m. per sessions, and they're only in-person and same-day bookings only, you know, in light of the fact that we want to have this available for people who do not have any computers at home. We made it as easy as possible because at the lab, we only are a computer lab. We're not issuing library cards or taking fines or anything like that. And there's 54 sessions throughout the day, 6 45-minute sessions. We've got 9 computers, and with 15-minute intervals for cleaning. And we do make exceptions for seniors or persons with mobility issues that they can phone ahead or book on a certain day. Next slide, please. We are very conscious of occupational health and safety because, like, we were the first one. We had exhaustive training by our safety coordinator, and he reinforced to us physical distance, wash your hands, and always avoid touching our faces. And we really worked hard to have a 2-meter distance between each workstation and the patron and the staff. We have placed engineering controls like stanchions and tables to kind of enforce that physical distancing. Like we went on the floor and literally measured with a tape measure. We also, above each station, we have signage to reflect hand washing, and like West Vancouver, we had notice upon entry that to not enter the space if they've got symptoms of illness. And of course, we have personal protective equipment for staff, mask, gloves, face shields, and that is made available by VPL. Next slide, please. Also, we have sanitizer right at the lab entrance, and each user after each user, we disinfect with an isopropyl alcohol solution, like any possible place where the patron could touch the keyboard, the mice, the monitor edges, and the base, with a cotton pad because we want it saturated. And because we had gotten advice from the BC Centre for Disease Control, we thoroughly clean and disinfect twice a day with a product called Quat. Everything is sprayed down, the workstation, the table, the chair, the floor, and the keyboard and mouse, we completely swap it out with a clean set. And we do that twice a day, just before lunch when we close and at the end of the day. Next slide, please. And here you see a typical chair, a workstation layout. The black spot, the black square that you see there is where the patron stuff go, but they put them everywhere. So we spray around the perimeter, and right above the computer, there's like a signage on what, you know, like physical distancing and hand washing guidelines. And on that CPU, there are a small sheet with a guide for patrons on how to log in, the printing limits, and how to get help from staff. Next slide, please. Of course, we have the stanchions, which is an engineering control to make sure that we are distanced. There's ongoing challenges, like because our patrons really are used to coming up with us. So what we do is we switch out with, because as you can appreciate, it's very difficult to see that far. And we also use a movable barrier, which I'll show you in the next slide to move closer with them. We do have we experimented with a remote desktop assistance called a Quick Assist, but it wasn't quick because it was like switching Bluetooth info. Like we had to exchange numeric codes with the patron to sync the tablet that the staff use in the patron's computer, which doesn't make sense when, you know, it's something that very quick that, you know, they need to find the print button or something, and it wasn't worth it. Next slide, please. For the information services and printing, of course, now you see the model of the movable plexiglass barrier. What these are repurposed old wooden book trucks, and our carpentry department put like a plexiglass barrier on top. And we have free printing with a maximum of 15 pages in 2 color, but we found that that was a bit generous. So we are actually going to dial that down when we open to the general public next week on Tuesday to 10 pages and no color. And a lot of our patrons spent their computing time on email, social media, YouTube, gaming, just like they did in the past. We expected them to like use it for like government documents and applying for CERB and all that stuff. But, you know, they just wanted to have fun and connect with their families. Next slide, please. We also have a mobile phone storage locker. To be honest, it wasn't very highly used because of the target audience that we have, but we wanted to get a sense of that, you know, how it's going to work when we roll these out. They secured their cell phones with a pin, and there's 2 types of USBs in there, like for an iPhone and an Android. And then, of course, we wiped down everything with isopropyl alcohol after use. Next slide, please. And I guess, like, you know, like we're going to get through this, because like the most important lesson, if there's anything that I could share with you, is like to be open to try different ways or ideas of delivering the service, and things will go awry, guaranteed, but it just informs us how to do our, how to tweak the processes and adjust accordingly, and really be supportive of staff. This is a lot for them to process, and it's important that we support them as best we can, be kind to them, and be kind to ourselves as well. So if you have, next slide. If you have any questions, please send me an email, and my phone number is there, and these slides will be preserved for you. I also invite you to email me, because I've prepared an information package for libraries, because we have been documenting our journey since we started, and I'm happy to help in any way. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Des. And thanks also for putting your questions in the chat box. So I'm just gonna start at the top and work my way down. If you have other questions that come up, or if you have a follow-up question, feel free to add that in there, and I'll be managing that. So starting at the top, Sarah, back to you at West Vancouver. What were some of the pinch points that you found during day 1 of opening? And what changes did you make this morning to try to address them?
So not really to do with computers at all. So the changes we made was the location of some of our displays of computers, or not computers, of books and puzzles. And we also had turned off on our self-checks the ability to do anything other than just scan your barcode to access checkout. But after many requests, we've turned back on manual barcode entry, as well as adding payment back onto the self-check. So those are some of the changes we made after day one.
Great. And another question for you. Are the computer bookings limited to library card holders only?
Yes, so that is for a couple reasons. One, just to manage our system and the buffers, so we can't have both our buffer guest pass as well as like a regular guest pass with Envisionware. And also it's very easy for folks to get a library card. We don't have any limitations. You can get a internet only card without, if you don't have ID. We have sort of temporary cards for temporary residents. So then we've been issuing cards online throughout this entire time, as well as before times. So it's pretty easy for folks to get a card.
Great, thank you. And Des just talked a little bit about how they manage the walk-up experience at VPL, but for others who have opened their doors and you've had a walk-up experience, how have you been managing it?
I can jump in. That's something we've been working with. Initially, we had just the 2 computers available, and one was exclusive for drop-in. So we had that computer available as possible. So people could come in, they would get a guest pass usually, and use the computer that was available for drop-in. We also had a laptop at the welcome station that had PC reservations on it. So we were able to set a reservation for patrons that walked in for a feature for a time later in the morning or afternoon. So that helped us schedule a little bit with those people who were just sort of dropping in as they had time.
Great, thanks. Sarah or Monika, anything different to add in about how you manage the walk-up experience?
I would just say, yeah, using PC Res at any of the workstations. All of our staff have access to it.
And that's pretty much the same in Burns Lake too.
Great, thank you. Okay, question for you, Des. When do you circulate the keyboards back in after you take them out?
We actually clean them thoroughly and we put them back aside and we use them again at the end of the day. So the keyboards we have 2 sets. So the first one is obviously unused, and then we pull them, we clean them thoroughly, and then they sit on a truck, and then they get put back at the end of the day. So they get a really good long time to kind of sit with the disinfectant. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, great, thanks. And I'll direct that to the other panelists too, because I know you're managing your keyboards kind of differently. Monika, for example, you're doing something really creative with cling wrap. Do you want to talk a little bit more about how you manage the keyboards?
So before we decided for a Klingon, we were trying some different ideas, but because of our library's small budget, we have to be very creative. And we tried, all of us actually, typing with the Klingon on our keyboards, and this is working really well. It takes a few minutes to get adjusted. It's a little bit slower in the beginning, but we talked to all our patrons who use the computers. If they are comfortable with Klingon, they said yes, it just takes a few minutes to be adopted to that. And I think it is just easy to take the Klingon wrap off after every usage and dispose it. So the disinfection or spraying the keyboard was not always what was very inviting for us. And that's why we just decided for the easy way. We try in these times where everyone has those additional works in the library, disinfecting, quarantining, and cleaning, we are just trying to limit the work to the staff. And also I do not have the full team back yet. So we're just trying to manage as best as we can.
Great, thank you. I'm going to move on to the next question about printing limits. Maybe we could just go down, starting with you, Sarah. What are your printing limits, and what are you charging for printing?
So we haven't changed sort of our printing costs. So it's 15 cents a page for black and white, 50 cents a page for color. It's been the same for about just over a decade now. And when we raised it from 10 cents to 15, there was a minor riot. Oops, sorry about that. Sort of we've lifted in Sierra, our ILS, sort of the threshold for maximum fines from $10 to $20. So as long as the printing is under 20, like as long as the charges on the account are under $20, we'll print it for them. If it is over, we'll just let them know you need to sort of lower the charges on your account before we're able to print it for you.
Great, thanks. And Rebecca, how about you? Any printing limits or charges?
Our printing limits and charges are the same. We did recently wipe a lot of pre-existing fines. So a lot of patrons who maybe were close to being blocked are no longer. So we've got a little bit more headroom there for people to accumulate some printing bills. Excuse me. But we have a $10 threshold. It's very similar to West Van. Our prices are a little bit different, but they're blocked at $10 when we just suggest that they pay that down so they can continue.
Great, thanks. And Des, a specific question for you. Can you show or share your handout that's on the CPU?
Absolutely. What I'll do is I'll email it to you, Andrea, and then it could be put in with the slides. I'll adjust it so that it shows it. And also it's in our information package. So Tanya, I'd be delighted to send the whole thing to you if you wish.
Great, thank you. And then another question for you, Des. Other than the speed issue, how did patrons respond to the idea of remote desktop assistance?
Thank you, Allison, and hi. They were actually very open to it and patient, but in the end, it just didn't make any sense for us to kind of keep at it because their questions are quite basic. It was around more that we can't see their screen rather than it is the complexity where we actually had to take over their desktop. You know, think of your regular library interaction where it's just showing them which button or how to download something. So, you know, by the time you actually sync, a whole bunch of time has elapsed, and it's not the best use of the patrons' 45 minutes and ours because it just took too long.
Great, thank you. So this is a question to anyone on the panel. It'd be great to hear from at least a few of you. To free up staff time, did you consider asking customers to clean the computer surfaces before using them? So providing them with the supplies, but asking them to clean it themselves? No, I just, to be honest with you, like I'm very concerned with the patrons. They come in, they're not wearing gloves, they're not wearing masks. I think that there are a couple that religiously bring wipes with them and do their own cleaning, but I don't think for our population anyway, it's a realistic expectation. And if we want to make sure that it's thoroughly disinfected, and I just, you know, with the time that they have on these computers, it's not practical nor it is safe, I believe.
Yes, I agree with Desiree. It's the same from our side. We would like to keep our staff on the procedure. They have very specific steps for the cleaning and disinfecting, and we know they are thoroughly done, and that's what we use our 15 minutes in between blocks for doing that, so the patron can enjoy the 45 minutes block.
Essentially the same for West Van. The staff have the training and know how to like do the cleaning. As I saw in the chat, like, you know, we don't necessarily want the patrons sort of spraying the screens directly with the cleaner or doing anything else that might cause issues. So yeah, that's why we clean between uses.
Great. Okay, another question. Are any of you finding that you need an area for a queue for access to the computers? If customers are waiting for their booking time to start, where are they doing so?
For VPL, they are on the, for a BPL, they are on the lobby upstairs, and then they are all led into the room at a batch. And so they're kind of standing, unfortunately, because like even the bench that was on the mezzanine level were taken away because, again, you know, it's enforcing that physical distancing that's very difficult. So there were no chairs for people to kind of wait, which I found really difficult, but you know, like people just kind of got used to it. And to give you an appreciation, like I came here you know, quite early this morning, and there are already people lined up at 8 o'clock waiting to sign up for the computers for 9. So it means that they've been standing there for an hour, which just is an indication of the demand and you know, the population that this is for, that they're you know, they're waiting for an hour for their computer.
We have people waiting in the lobby outside, and I think this echoes what Des has just mentioned, is that we've really had to focus on the signage and those distancing markers in that space as well, outside of the library, because we recognize that our services are creating a bit of a cluster outside of our space. So being aware of that is definitely something we've had to do.
Yeah, I've got, if people arrive early, we've got 6 sort of dots for lining up with the markers on the floor on the lower floor. There's also lineup markers outside of the library. And if someone needed to sit, we've got a couple sort of wingback chairs on the lower floor if someone isn't able to do that on their own, or if they bring like a small child with them that they need to sort of station while they're using the computers.
In Burns Lake, we're a small library. We do not have a lobby. And when people are coming out to use our computers, and currently all 3 of them are busy, we are asking them to come back on a certain time. This is changing as of today. So there will be no more appointments. The people can come in and drop in. And if the computers are available, they are welcome to use it. And if not, then the same. Either they will browse the library, or we will ask for them to come later. We do not have any sitting space available to the public.
Great, thank you. So I have a couple of questions about supplies. The first one is, where are you sourcing your cleaning supplies, like wipes, etc.?
We source ours through our purchasing department, who have contacts through the city of Vancouver. And with the isopropyl alcohol, it's actually mixed in-house by our building maintenance workers. It's a 70% alcohol mixture, and the quat is also mixed in-house, which makes it a lot easier. We have been using paper towels to use, but we're finding the makeup pads that are, you know, the cotton makeup pad removers, like the cotton pads, are way like it's a little it's smaller, yes, but it's a lot more absorbent with the cleaning products, and it's a bit more thorough and disinfecting, we find. So those are just available through Costco or Amazon, but the disinfectants are mixed in-house, purchased from our janitorial supplies. The wipes are impossible to get, apparently, from even our purchasing manager. They're very high commodity, and there's a global shortage.
Thank you. What about others?
We're actually making our own wipes, sort of. Our janitorial department found a bucket system where you take a dry roll of wipes that are, I think, some kind of synthetic fabric-y feeling thing. And they go in the bucket. You put the solution in, or the alcohol solution that we're using, which again is a 70%. And then you put the lid on and you pull out an alcohol soaked wipe, so we don't have to deal with spraying. Like Des mentioned, that thicker fabric has been better. We feel like we get more of the solution actually onto the surfaces.
Great, thank you.
We purchase through our municipality. They've got contacts through their sort of purchasing department, but I can ask sort of if they have any leads on companies.
Great, thanks, Sarah.
Translate is purchasing from Midway Purnell. We work with them very closely. And also we are being creative, the same as Rebecca. We are mixing our solutions in-house. And so we're using, like I already mentioned, vinegar solution or some Clorox solution after recipe from CDC, and paper towels. That's pretty much.
Great, thank you. And then the second question about supplies is more about how you're managing access to PPE, like shields and face masks for library staff. So maybe we can start with you, Rebecca.
Just had to unmute myself. We have PPE available to all staff, but we've worked really hard to make sure that our cleaning procedures don't require it. Our janitorial staff use a Quat product daily on all frequently touched surfaces and the public computer area. And that does require PPE. So they are already using that. So it's not adding more gloves that we need to be using during the day. So the solutions that our staff are using don't require PPE. And then on the procedure front, when we're actually working with patrons, we've been working to ensure that our staff don't have to come within 6 feet of someone. So we have reusable masks and gloves and shields available to staff, but we've been working to ensure that none of the situations we'd be putting them in would have them close enough to a patron or another staff member to require that use. We also have a lot of barriers in the space right now.
Great, thank you. And how about you, Monika, and your smaller system in Burns Lake?
So we actually purchased a pretty big supply just in the beginning when everything started. It was beginning of March. So I have face shields for every staff member available. They are disinfected and cleaned with mild solution every day after usage. We do have a stack of masks in the library, and I saw that they are widely available in our community. So until now, we never had any problems with purchasing PPEs. Yeah, the staff also, if they can use the reusable masks if they feel more comfortable with it, but this is working pretty well.
Great. Sarah or Des, anything else to add in on PPE for staff?
Go ahead, Sarah.
That's fine. Go, Desiree. Oh. Okay. As I mentioned in my presentation, we did purchase face shields that we've given to each staff to use if they'd like. They are also welcome to use masks or gloves, with the understanding that when we did the training on PPE, we gave all the instructions on management and cleaning of shields, masks, and like when you are using gloves, you do need to wash your hands, be gloved hands as much as you would your hands regularly, or dispose of them after every interaction. So staff are able to do what they feel comfortable with. And again, like the others have mentioned, you know, the barriers, the markings on how far people should be apart through both training and those interventions to prevent the need to get within 2 meters of someone.
Great. And Des, I'm sorry, I'm just going to go on to the next question just because we're coming up to 10:30. So I'm just going to move on to the next question. Have any of you started offering public Wi-Fi access within your branches?
So we have public Wi-Fi through, like we've never turned it off. People use Wi-Fi outside of the library right now since we don't have space for studying available. And hopefully within the next couple of weeks, we'll have a new outdoor sort of patio area for people to, over the summer, be able to spread out and use that. But since we don't have seating available, even though there is Wi-Fi, it doesn't make it super useful.
We're not offering in-branch access for Wi-Fi right now at VPL, but we are going to change it so that it's 24/7 and we're boosting access.
Great, thank you.
Translate had all the way long access to the Wi-Fi. We never closed. It was available 24/7. It was really important to the public. So they were not able to access the library, but they were able to use our Wi-Fi from the parking lot all the time.
Great, thanks, Monika. Next question, is anyone offering dedicated children's computing? And if so, how is distancing working? That looks like a no.
We're gonna see on Tuesday when we open the children's library.
Okay.
There's 2 stations there, but I'm imagining they're going to be far apart, at least 2 meters apart.
Okay, so Jillian, if you're interested in that, it sounds like she could follow up with you, Des.
Yes, please.
Okay, great.
Jillian, you can touch base with Shannon Ozerny as well. I know the 2 of you have worked together. So we made the conscious decision not to have any computers in our children's department, although we do have sort of procedures in place for if kids come down and expect to be able to game together.
Great. And then our last question, are you making masks available to patrons either before or as they enter? No.
I can jump on that one. No, we are not having available masks to our patrons. We do not require them. We actually, we ask them, but it is not a must. So the patron is welcome to come with their own mask, but we do not provide any masks to the patrons.
Great.
Same with VPL. It's just going to be a very costly proposition. And we just can't afford it, unfortunately.
Okay, great. So we do have time for one quick question if there's anything that you would feel remiss at not asking once we hang up in a few minutes. So you've got 30 seconds to type in one last question if you have it. Okay, doesn't look like anything's coming in. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us today. That's all we have time for. Feel free to reach out to any of us if you have questions that we weren't able to get to today. And thank you, Rebecca, Sarah, Monica, and Desiree for sharing your expertise virtually with BCLA members and the library community. Thanks to all of you who attended today. And just as a reminder, this recording, as well as the PowerPoint and some of the other files we mentioned today, will be available on the BCLA website at bclaconnect.ca on the BCLA Summer Conference page. Thank you so much, everybody.